I'm going to ask everyone to kindly find their seats, if you could. I'm going to ask the immediate family to gather standing actually in front of my podium. I'm going to do the Kriya, the cutting of the clothing. There's a brief ritual that starts in the Torah, that when we hear of a close relative that has passed, you tear your clothing, representing that without Yaira in our lives, that there is a tear. I'm going to do it off the microphone, but I wanted everyone to understand what we were doing. Jonathan, you're here. Yossi.
We are going to begin the funeral service for Mrs. Shapiro. If you have a cell phone, I'd ask you kindly to place it in the silent mode or turn it completely off at this time. I'd also like to welcome on behalf of the family, anybody visiting us via live stream. Thank you as well. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Michael Schwab and Rabbi Alex Friedman of North Suburban Synagogue Bethel in Highland Park.
I begin with the recitation of the 15th Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai, mi yagor ba'ohalecha, mi hishkon b'har kodshecha, holech tamim u'fo'al tzedek, v'dover emet b'yevavo, lo ragal al leshono, lo asa le'ra, v'chapa lo nasa al kiravo, nivseh be'enav nim'as, ve'et Adonai yikabed, nishbar laharav lo yamir, kaspo lo natam haneshech, v'shochad anaki lo lakach, Ose ele lo yemot le'olam. A Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit in the place and the presence of God? Live with integrity. Do what is right. Speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue. Do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own. Then shall you stand firm forever. Amen.
Amen. Now I'm going to chant from Psalm 23, and afterwards I'll invite anybody who wants to join me in the English. The English can be found in the service folder. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binoteh sheyar bitzeni, ame menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begei tzal mavet, lo yirara ki ata yimadihi, shiftecha u'mishan techa hema yenachamuni, Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai, dishanta v'Hashem roshi kol siravaya, ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai liorech yamim. Please join me in the English if you would like. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today we express our fervent belief and our hope that the memory of Yaira bat Hechazan Yaakov, Shaul, v'Malka dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I want to read a little bit from the Wisdom of Ben Sira, one of the great ancient scholars, who speaks about the eternal and lasting memory of somebody we deeply care about. And I know from speaking to the family last night how much love, admiration, and respect you all had for Yaira. He said, when parents who have taught their children pass on, that passing is not true death. As long as the child lives, and even more so grandchildren and great-grandchildren, there is a part of that parent that can never die. When alive, a parent rejoices with their children, and in the death, that parent will not grieve, for she knows that her memory and her legacy is handed down, l'dor v'dor, from one generation to the next in an eternal cycle. And let us say, Amen. Speaking of that next generation, a number of members of the family are going to say some words of tribute and memory about Yaira, and I'm going to call on Beth to speak first.
Our mother did not have an easy life. Born to immigrant parents in what was then Palestine, she came to the United States at the age of 2. As part of a very small Jewish community in Salem, Massachusetts, she often wished that her name was Rosemary instead of Yaira. Her family did not have a lot of money, but there was an abundance of love. When she married my father while a student at Mount Holyoke and he was still in the Navy, her roommate had to get written permission from her parents to continue to live with my mother. And when she became pregnant, she was asked to leave Mount Holyoke, where there were no pregnant students in 1957. When she followed my father from Salem to Chicago with a 6-week-old baby, it was the first of many moves my parents would make as my father pursued his career. Moving from Hoffman Estates to Oyster Bay, New York, to Lexington, Massachusetts, and finally to Philadelphia with a growing family was not easy, because my father worked long hours and she was the one who always had to integrate us into the community. But wherever we moved, she made lifelong friends who she cherished and stayed in touch with for many years. The synagogue was always the core of our family life. She loved and nurtured not only her own children, but her nieces and nephews and other young people with whom she came into contact. All weekend, we have been receiving memories from our friends and relatives who have described her as loving, kind, fun with a capital F and exclamation points, compassionate, and always making everyone feel special. Our Aunt Norma told me yesterday that my paternal grandmother, Rose, would say that our mother was to the manner born, and meant that she was always interested in arts and literature and was always compassionate. Not only the immediate thought that I had about how good manners were always very important to her. After our father passed away, she moved here to be closer to her family, and she lived at Lincolnwood Place for almost 16 years, where we called her the mayor of Lincolnwood Place. She was on the food committee, was an ambassador to new residents, worked in the store, and helped arrange Friday night services, where she was proud that she often lit the candles. She took literature classes at Oakton College. She and I would go to brunch and then to matinees at Chicago Shakespeare and the opera, which I think she particularly enjoyed because my father never liked either. Our mother had many health issues, particularly in the last 4 years, but until very recently, it did not get her down. She had 3 devoted caregivers who were with her all during COVID, and I truly believe she would not have lived this long if she had had to isolate in her own apartment. 2 of them, Babette and Nancy, are here today, and I know that Lorena is here in spirit, although she is in the Philippines, and we are very grateful to them. Mommy spent much of the last few years in a wheelchair. Last year, after she received the invitation for Joshua and Emily's wedding reception, she asked me not how she was going to get to Philadelphia, but how we were going to get her address. There was not a doubt in her mind that she was going to that wedding reception. Some of you might remember a commercial for what I think was a cold medicine, maybe from the 1980s, that had a tagline, "You're a good daughter, Mildred." My mother would say it to me, even as recently as she was in the hospital over the last few weeks. I hope it was true.
Now I'm going to ask Yossi to say some words about his mother. Of course. They're so modern.
There are so many things we could talk about to pay honor and homage to our mom, and we could be here together for a very long time. But I'll speak briefly, and I will focus on the most fundamental part of our mom, really of any of us, which is our names. Her name, Yaira. I don't know the story of why our beloved and blessed grandparents chose the name, but it was an inspired choice and only one of the many miracles they accomplished in their lives. Our mom's and grandmother's and great-grandmother's name, Yaira, comes from the Hebrew word or, which means light. And the name Yaira means she shines. She illuminates, she spreads light. Can anyone think of a more perfect name for Yaira? Well, maybe Savta, which means grandmother in Hebrew, and that was another name that she bore so proudly for the last 30 plus years. I heard last night for the first time, and then again Beth shared with us this morning that when we were swapping Yaira stories, that as a girl, mom did not like her name and would have been happy for a name less distinctive, maybe easier to pronounce, perhaps less strange and foreign to the ears of her classmates in Salem, Massachusetts. But it could never have happened, for her name described and describes her perfectly, and she defined the name Yaira for all time. Yaira, it's not a common name at all. During my life, including 8 years living in Israel, I can count the number of Yairas whom I have met on one hand. It's a rare name for a rare person. In so many ways throughout her life and in everything she did, she spread light and shared light. And over the past dark days, we have delighted in hearing about the light that she spread around in the lives of so many near and far. And we thank all of our friends and dear ones who've sent us stories about our mother and the impact she had on their life. Though there were dark times in her life, as in any life, there was nothing dark about Mom ever. In so many ways throughout her life and in everything she did, she spread light and shared light. And now it's on us, her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. There is one great-granddaughter now, more later, perhaps, to keep her light. It's on us to keep her light shining on. May her name be blessed, Yehi Shema Baruch. May her name live forever, Yehi Shema Lenetzach.
Now I'm going to ask Jonathan to say a few words about his mom as well.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time this morning to celebrate the life of our mom. The expression "to know her is to love her" summarizes who Mom was and how she lived her life. If you met my mom, you loved my mom. Almost 7 years ago, on Mom's 80th birthday, we had a birthday party for which I wrote a poem. The first line of that poem is elegant and kind, eloquent with a beautiful mind. And that is who Yaira Ackerman Shapiro was. Classy and elegant, so kind. Never a bad word to say about anyone, and a sharp, beautiful mind. Mom loved to read books and the Sunday New York Times, watch all types of PBS programming, had a varied taste in music from Willie Nelson to opera, and had a big love for everything Peanuts. Not the nut, the Snoopy, Lucy, Linus, and Charlie Brown kind of Peanuts. But what Mom loved the most was family celebrations, and being savta, the Hebrew word for grandmother, to 6 grandchildren, their spouses or significant others, and 1 great-granddaughter. If you were dating one of Savta's grandchildren, Savta treated you like family. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my brother-in-law, Ben, sister-in-law, Sarah, and of course, my most wonderful wife, Carly, who always treated Mom like their own mothers, and whom Mom treated like her 3 additional children. And finally, I want to thank 2 of Mom's caregivers who are here today, Babette and Nancy, my sister mentioned that, and Lorena, who's in the Philippines, who were so dedicated and always went above and beyond to care for Mom. Mom, we will miss you every day, but the great memories will live forever. We love you. Thank you.
Representing the next generation, we have a couple of the grandchildren who are also going to pay tribute to their savta. And we'll start out with Zachary.
So as we were talking last night with the rabbi, everybody was talking about how good her manners were. My mother was just, Savta's manners were. And we were just talking about, my mother just talked about this, and at Mount Holyoke, so the family legend goes, she took a class called Gracious Living on Tuesday nights. And our table always had to be perfectly set, because otherwise it would have been a waste of Zadie's tuition dollars if we didn't. And I remember one time, my grandmother stood up at a family dinner to reach over my mother, and it was like the glass had shattered. But what I really want to talk today, because I think we yesterday as we were talking to the rabbi, there were sort of lessons that we were sort of deriving, and nobody mentioned the phone calls. So my grandmother would call you and speak for a minute and hang up the phone, and in 2004, this amazing thing happened where the Boston Red Sox, for the first time in 80-something years, won the World Series. And this made everybody who lived in Boston or like went to Boston once on a school trip really excited, right? So Josh and I, who had been to Boston more than once, started watching the Red Sox games. And Savta would call us after the game was over and say, "Did you see the game?" And we'd say yes, and we'd say whatever stupid thing we saw the outfielder do. And she'd say, "Yeah, that was dumb." And then she'd say, "Thanks for your time," and she'd hang up the phone. And I don't know, I think I was 11 when this happened. And my mother, I said, "So why does she do that?" And my mother said, "Well, she doesn't want to be rude, and she doesn't want to take up your time. She doesn't want to bother you." But then she would call back later in the day when she thought of something else that she wanted to talk to you about. And so this would go on. And as she moved into Lincolnwood, she would listen to a record and she'd call me to talk about the conductor or the whatever. And then she'd hang up the phone. And then she'd listen to the next record and she'd call me again. And so, I think it was like this nice little workaround that she figured out where like she wasn't being, taking up a huge block of your time. But she found something and she wanted to talk to you about it. And as I sort of look at the way that her grandchildren, behave, it seems to be the same thing. When they have something they want to talk to you about, they talk to you about it, and then they're done. So it's just a nice little story. Make sure as you go out, if you want to talk to somebody, talk to them, because have that nice moment, because that's how I'm going to always go remember Savta.
Now I'm going to call up Jacob to say some words. A little higher.
When I think about Savta, there are a few things I'll remember most. The first is her everyday demeanor. Savta had a gentle voice and was quick to smile. She spoke softly and people paid attention. I'll remember that kind and gentle demeanor when I think about Savta. There was only one time I ever heard her raise her voice. I was a little kid in the back seat on the way to the Children's Museum in Philadelphia with Saba and Savta. Another driver had cut Saba off and he said a bad word in front of his grandkids, which Savta was not having, and she let him know about it. I'm grateful for those trips to Philly as a kid to see Savta and Saba, but Savta had a whole second act here in the Chicago suburbs after Saba passed. And as I grew up, I came to appreciate more and more how important family was to Savta. And so the second thing I remember most about Savta is how much she loved just being our Savta. It wasn't just that she loved attending a college graduation or a wedding or a Passover Seder, and she loved those a whole lot. She loved showing up there as our Savta, the one who gives out the Afikomen money at Pesach and the talit at your bar mitzvah, and her grandparents plus ones her blessing. And she loved that whether you were family or a friend, you knew her by that one name, Savta. It was like Madonna or Prince or something. Her voicemail has always started with, "Hi Jacob, it's your Savta," and I could hear in her voice how much that name meant to her. I got to grow up as a teenager and then an adult in Chicago with Savta right here. And of course, as I spent more time with her, she got older and slowed down. But for Savta, for whom family was everything, missing family time was never an option. And so the third thing I'll always remember about Savta is something that I'm sure I appreciated as a kid, but really came to appreciate most as an adult. It was her relentless optimism and positivity. She loved going out with family to restaurants, museums, and the movies. But in the last few years, it got harder, much harder, for her to join her family out and about. And I've heard others say that in the last year, she was just so tired. Who could blame her? But she would always be calm and patient as her healthcare aides and family members helped her in and out of cars, or even once drove her in vans across the country to a wedding to get to those family events that meant so much to her. She never complained. And she was content with just sitting with you, even if the two of you weren't saying much. Optimism wasn't something Savta passed along through words. She didn't say, "Look on the bright side," or "See the glass half full." Savta was just optimistic in the way she moved her through life. I hope to be like that when I'm her age. Savta, you gave us a lot to remember about you. We love you and we already miss you.
Such beautiful tributes from loving family members of multiple generations. For that was part of what made Yaira A special. She found a way to create a unique connection with each and every person, no matter how different they were in personality, in age, or in relation to her. She just valued other people. She only wanted the very best for everyone she met, and she enjoyed her relationships with others immensely. As the family told me around Beth and Ben's dining room table last night, which was really just so affirming, lovely family celebrating somebody they loved and cared about so much, it was clear that Yai was their Eshet Chayil, their woman of valor. And she used to love when Yossi would call her from Israel each and every Friday night to recite this section of Proverbs to her. And I want to chant a little bit of it now. Eshet Chayil mi'imtza Rachok mipnini michra, batach balev bala, v'shala lo yechsar. I'm going to skip. Sheker achein, vehevel ayofi, Yishairat Adonai, hiti talal, tinula, mi priyadeha, vaya hallelujah, bishari maseha. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts confidence in her and lacks no good thing, and she is good to him and all others and never bad. She opens her hand to the needy, extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household. Her children come forward and bless her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. I was touched by the fact that Yossi described her name as being perfectly fitting. Well, I think Eshet Chayil is perfectly fitting for her as well. Think of all the things that were mentioned in the Proverbs and attach those to traits of her personality, and you will find Yaira. As the verses from the Proverbs state, Yaira was a woman upon whom others relied, especially her family. She was a woman filled with wisdom, her life a constant expression of kindness and compassion. She was a pillar of strength, resilience, and hope as she constantly moved forward with so much positivity and optimism, rarely wasting her breath on complaint or anger. Rather, she lived a life of love, and she will be sorely missed by all who knew her. Therefore, it is my sad honor to offer condolences to the family, from me, from Bethel, to her treasured children, to Beth and Ben, to Yossi and Sarah, to Jonathan and Carly, and to her adored grandchildren, Joshua and Emily, Zachary and Kelly, and Shira, Isaac, Jacob and Aaron, as well as Maor, to her cherished great-granddaughter, Yaira, to her beloved sister, Dottie, and her husband, Jerome, as well as to all of her loving family and friends. My hope is that the words we share and the traditions we observe provide some measure of comfort at a difficult time. I'm only going to highlight a few other things because the family did such a beautiful job of capturing not only what they experienced being related to such a beautiful woman, but some of the things that were mentioned last night. But it was clear to me last night that her greatest legacy was all of you. It was her family, the wonderful people who were closest to her, who clearly not only loved her, but also loved each other. As her children shared with me, their mother did everything she possibly could for them, supporting them and loving them at each stage of life. She was truly the heart and the backbone of the family, using her beautiful blend of strength and kindness to guide each of her children, as different as they are, to find their own path in life, which each of you surely did. And not only that, but to do so in a way that kept you all together, supporting each other, laughing with each other, comforting each other, and celebrating with each other. Without her, I know there's a huge gap in your lives, but I know that you know that love is stronger than death, and that you carry her legacy and memory in each of you every single day, and as you pass it down from generation to generation. I also want to take a moment to share what a wonderful older sister Yai was. I had an opportunity to spend some time with Dottie, and she told me when they were younger, the 6 years between them meant they had a fairly typical older sister, younger sister relationship. Yet in adulthood, that relationship flowered in such a beautiful way, and they became the best of friends. They spoke every day, and they shared a deep love. Dottie, I can only imagine how much you will miss her. May you always cherish your memories together. And yet Yaira was also had amazing relationships with her nieces, nephews, cousins, keeping relationships strong across the generations. She so valued all of you, and I know how much you valued her. But perhaps, as you've already learned, no love is greater than that of a savta for her grandchildren. As you heard, she made each one feel special, accepting each person who they are, with who they were, no judgment. I love the story, Beth, that you told, that when Joshua was getting married, there was just no way she wasn't going. It was just an accepted fact. And the biggest issue was where that dress was coming from. And there she was, reaching out her arm during the ceremony, and there out on the dance floor at the celebration. She wasn't going to miss that, just like she didn't miss almost anything else in all of your lives. And that love that she shared extended to all the people her children and grandchildren loved. She was a wonderful mother-in-law and a welcoming Savta to all. Emily and Kelly made a point to tell me how inclusive she was and how she made them feel part of the family right away, and how touching and important that was for them as they entered this beautiful family. She just loved being Savta, and as you heard, she would include anybody who is willing to be her Savta as well, and that Savta love. As you heard from Beth, Yaira was actually born in Israel, then Palestine, and her father was a Chazan and from a religious family. This love of Yiddishkeit in Israel instilled in her as a child, she definitely carried throughout her life. They were always dedicated members of a synagogue wherever they lived, Boston, Long Island, Philly, Chicago. In fact, they were founding members of the Shul and Hoffman Estates. I didn't know her, of course, in those early years, but I did love seeing her when she did come to Bethel, sitting with Beth and Ben and sometimes the boys when they were around. And honestly, I imagine her looking this way in every shul that she sat in, but she just looked so perfectly content and happy to be in shul, sitting with her family, hearing the Torah being read, getting to kiss it when it came around. It always made me smile when I passed her by, surrounding herself with the elements in her life that she loved so much. The family also talked about how privileged and happy she felt to take them all to Israel at her 75th birthday, a trip of so many good memories, combining family, Judaism, fun, and Israel, all of which are great, great elements to her. So from the beginning of her life, Yaira was very smart. She was kind, and as you heard, a well-mannered, loving person. She was a salutatorian in high school with a long list of clubs and sports to her name enumerated in her high school yearbook. You heard that she was very cultured. She loved to read, appreciated art, music, and in fact, she got a degree in French literature and her master's in education as an adult after her early college career had a pleasant interruption for a wonderful marriage and a blessed pregnancy, and she was a great friend and a generous soul. She loved you for who you were, no judgment. With her quiet strength, she supported you in whatever way she could. She looked to the future with optimism, as Proverbs says, focusing on the blessings in life, building relationships based on admiration, respect, and love wherever she went. Yaira Shapiro, Yaira Bat Chazan, Yaakov, Shaul, V'Malka will sorely be missed. Ti zichra brucha, may her memory always be for a blessing, and let everyone here say, Amen. I'm going to ask you to kindly rise for the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, Kizohar Arakia Mazirim et Nishmat, Yaira Bat Hechazan Yaakov Shaul V'Malka, Shalcha Liolama, V'gan Eitzei Menuchata, Ana Bala Rachamim, Hastireh b'seiter kenafecha liolamim, utzror b'tzror chaim et nishmata. Adonai unacho ata, v'tanuch b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen.
Amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Yaira Shapiro, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that a loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
You may be seated for a moment.
This does conclude the service in the chapel. The interment will be private, and Shiva details will be announced later this week. Mrs. Shapiro's grandchildren who are present will serve as pallbearers. At this time, I would ask that they please step forward, and I'm going to ask you again to rise as we escort Mrs. Shapiro from the chapel. Pallbearers, you're going to go like that.
Yamipach, Yakush, Midever Havot, Veratoya Sepach, Votaka Knafa Tetze, Tzinav Sochera, Hamito, Lotira Mipach Alala, Mechetio Fiumam, Midever Bofa Yalof, Mikete Veshutzorai, Ipo Mitzlacha Elef, Urvavam Minecha, Elef, Aloigash, Bakmenecha Tabit, Shibamah Shim Tira, Yatana Masi, Masi Alyam Santana.